Hello friends, my name is Marines, and today we're going to be reviewing Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I feel like first I want to talk about why I'm making this video and why I'm making it now. I originally read Throne of Glass back in, I believe it was around 2015. This book was published in 2012, so it was a few years after it was originally published. There was a lot of excitement for A Court of Thorns and Roses, so I pre-ordered that. I got myself a copy of Throne of Glass, and I was incredibly disappointed with both of them. I really did not enjoy either of these books, which was a very unpopular opinion at that time and has surprisingly only gotten more unpopular with time. Sarah J. Maas is an incredibly popular author, and not only is she incredibly popular, but she remains an entry point into a lot of reading communities. A lot of people find their way back to reading or find their way to Book Talk or BookTube via Sarah J. Maas because someone recommended Sarah J. Maas to them, or because she's at every bookstore or every airport. She just continues to be everywhere. Her popularity doesn't seem to be diminishing, and I get asked about her work all the time. And to be fair, I still reference her work, especially when we're talking about problematic work or engaging with things that are problematic that are very popular. But then I still get questions about what's wrong with her work after all. And it's just been so many years since I read it that really what I had in my brain was like a memorization of my review instead of vividly remembering the text. And I kept thinking about how I've changed as a reader and I've changed as a reviewer across all of these years. That is certainly part of it. But I think that there is another part, something that happens to me when I do bring up Sarah J. Maas, or I'm sure that I will hear because I'm doing this project, is why am I even talking about her, right? Isn't this promotion? Why waste time in criticizing? Why promote her on my platform? All of those questions about whether or not people should take the time to criticize Sarah J. Maas. I've thought about this a lot, not only about Sarah J. Maas, but across my work and across Snark Squad. We've always asked these questions about where the lines are of criticism and critique and promotion. The thing I think that really tipped me over the edge this year is the fact that because so many, I think especially of her fans, kind of take that position of, well, just stop talking about her. Or even the people who are critical of Sarah J. Maas think, well, like, okay, fine, we did it, we criticized her, nobody can anymore. What actually continues to breed is the fandom. She continues to get more popular and in spaces where now there aren't even critical reviews of her work. And I know this for a fact because every time I mention something bad about her work, I will get any number of comments going, wait, what did she do? That her popularity is far outpacing like the number of people willing to engage critically with her work and to like put that work out there. And again, this year I saw people doing readathons for Sarah J. Maas and reading projects for Sarah J. Maas, and people are getting excited for the next book in the series. And I don't know, it just inspired me to finally update this review because I had read Throne of Glass before and continue on with the series so that we can talk critically about what exactly is wrong with Sarah J. Maas. Another thing I wanted to add is that I might reference some of Sarah J. Maas's behavior, but this video and this series is not about what she has done as a person. I will link in the description a good summary of some of the things that she has done as a person, including using Breonna Taylor's death in order to promote her book. And I personally think that that one thing, with absolutely no retraction and no apology, is enough to stop promoting Sarah J. Maas. But if you want the full summary and breakdown, I will put that link in the description. The final thing I will say is that I went back and forth on where to put this video, whether or not it would be a bonus video for my bindery community. To be very honest with you, I thought it would be a good perk, a good thing to sort of motivate people to go follow me over there. And then I was like, yeah, but that puts it behind a paywall, and I want people to be able to engage with criticism of her work. So back and forth, you guys are seeing it here on YouTube, but I'm gonna ask you that if you enjoyed this work, if you enjoyed this video, if it made you think at all or anything along those lines, that you take the 15 seconds that it will take to go follow me on my bindery, which you can do so for free, or if you are able to support my work as well. There will also be a video on my bindery, a bonus video that is a full plot synopsis for Throne of Glass, but for this video, we're going to jump right into the review. We're gonna cover Sarah J. Maas's writing, Selena Sardathian as a character, the plot in this first book in Throne of Glass, the world building, and most importantly, at the end, we're gonna talk about the mystical minority trope and Nehemia. I think that starting here is also really interesting because I suspect that this is going to be one of Sarah J. Maas's better books. So I've read Throne of Glass, I read A Court of Thorns and Roses, I read most of A Court of Mist and Fury, and I read most of House of Earth and Blood. So I've read the first books in each of her series, and her writing to me has gotten worse, and she as an author has been less contained, less edited. So going back into Throne of Glass, it was really interesting to see the starting point and to realize that in fact that this is going to be one of the better things that I read from this author. I know that that is the exact opposite of how most fans feel about the series. It is like 2 or 3 or 4 books into the series that people really start to feel like Maas hits her stride and that she's writing really strong, intricate fantasies. But my guess is that as we get more intricate and more complicated, and as we get less and less edited, and as we go into like the newer forms of Maas's misogyny and the either bad or lacking representation, that those books are going to get weaker. But we start here, and it's really interesting to see just kind of a bland YA adjacent fantasy of the 2012 era. I think that these like first points as we talk about the writing and the plot, these are things that are always, and I think especially here, are subjective, right? Whether or not you can enjoy any of this, like I understand the differences there. To me, this is not very enjoyable. The writing itself feels juvenile. It is a bit over dramatic, and in all of the worst places. There are high stakes and there are things that deserve sort of heft and weight, and we skip over those things to be really over dramatic about things that like to me personally don't call for it. Your mileage may vary on whether or not you will be able to enjoy something like princes are not supposed to be handsome. They're sniveling, stupid, repulsive creatures. This one, ... This ... How unfair of him to be royal and beautiful. Which that is spoken as she is being dragged out of the salt mines where she's been enslaved, and she's being brought in front of the prince for reasons unknown to her. She thinks princes are not supposed to be handsome. Can you ha 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 with that and like keep it pushing? I don't know, that's up to you. I don't find that very enjoyable. Here we also start to see Sarah J. Maas introduce the things in her writing that will be present always that I find kind of insufferable. One, we see some nonsensical descriptions. This was better edited. I think that some of her later books and how often we are just getting so many words that mean nothing or actually mean the opposite of what Sarah J. Maas intends. And here that still sometimes happens where you're reading a description, you're like, what does that even mean? We also see the use of repetition and the abuse of ellipses and em dashes in order to force tone. We get a lot of things like repeating a word in order to emphasize things, or we will end a chapter and it will be like, and then she saw the king, and then you turn the page and the next chapter starts with the king. So that kind of very dramatic repetition. Whenever I talk about the em dashes in Sarah J. Maas's work, I get a ton of people who come into my comments that are like, I'm an author and I love em dashes. Oh no. And I understand, because em dashes are very flexible as a punctuation, and oftentimes where you're not sure what could go or how to keep this thought going, an em dash will suit. The overuse of this em dash and like the poor use of them in spaces where like it doesn't even really make sense, I think is really jarring. It is jarring from like a visual perspective where they start to jump off the page to me. Like sometimes I turn a page and where there are like 7 em dashes on a page, that is like a poor visual experience. And it also is jarring as you are reading. Like you are being forced into reading in a very specific tone. And all of those instances, especially the ones where the em dash is being used incorrectly, it brings me out of the story. Yes, I counted them throughout the entire book. And this, I mean, this is like give or take because I only went through this once. I did not go back and double check my work, but I found 865 em dashes and about 400 hardcover pages, which if you are hearing this and are like, oh no, my em dashes, if you have 865 em dashes, I feel very confident telling you that you too also have too many em dashes. It is to me the sign of an author that doesn't trust herself or her audience, and it creates a pretty terrible reading experience, or one where you have to like ignore a lot. You have to go quickly in order for it to be a pleasurable experience. Selena Sardathian is our main character, and she is an assassin who was betrayed and caught. And at the beginning of this story, she is working in the salt mines, and she is plucked out of the salt mines by the crown prince because there is going to be a competition, and the winner of that competition is going to become the king's royal assassin. And so Dorian picks Selena as his competitor, and she is brought out of the mines and goes into the palace to participate in these games. Selena is, to me, a very hollow protagonist. She is plagued by some inconsistent writing. She is plagued by how shallow the world and the plot are. For instance, there is this very strange overemphasis on her beauty, and I think that this is a result of a number of things. One being of its time of being a YA-ish fantasy in 2012. I think it is also a product of this being a self-insert kind of story, and I think it is a product of having a plot and stakes that it very barely cares about. The issue to me isn't that Selena is beautiful, or that she cares about clothing, or that she cares about luxury and finery. The problem is that these things aren't gracefully or skillfully woven into the plot. Again, the story is either banking on you either ignoring this or glossing over it, or also not caring about the stakes in the plot, because it matters to you too that the main character is thin and conventionally attractive. This is another case where, again, the instances or the way that it is introduced feels very heavy-handed and clunky. There are ways that she almost did some of this well, in terms of Selena leaving the salt mines and not being able to sleep on a comfortable mattress and sleeping on the floor. Like, that made sense with her characterization, or her like wanting rich, delicious food and not being able to keep it down. But then as soon as she's well again, we see her often really enjoying food. Like, that is done well. But then we get scenes like when she's first brought out of the mines and being put before the prince, and she has no idea why. Prince notes how dirty she is. She looked at her rags and stained skin, and she couldn't suppress the twinge of shame. What a miserable state for a girl of former beauty. At a passing glance, one might think her eyes blue or gray, perhaps even green, depending on the color of her clothing. Up close, though, these warring hues were offset by the brilliant ring of gold around her pupils. But it was her golden hair that caught the attention of most, hair that still maintained a glimmer of its glory. In short, Selena Sardathian was blessed with a handful of attractive features that compensated for the majority of average ones, and by early adolescence, she discovered that with the help of cosmetics, that these average features could easily match the extraordinary assets. Not the time, not the place. In the story in general, there is a lot of telling versus showing, and that weakens so many moments where you could give a little bit of grace, say in some melodramatic writing or in places with like a weaker plot. I think the place that you see this most, and how Selena ends up feeling most like a hollow character, is because we are told so much about characteristics that she absolutely does not show us. We are told that she is the best assassin ever. In all of the land, she is the best assassin ever. And honestly, she's like the best at everything. Almost everyone likes her except for like the two big bad villains. And even they sometimes have lines about like, ah, that assassin's just way too good. Or like, oh, she sure is pretty. Like, even the people who hate her have these moments. She even plays piano really well. She has an affinity for animals, or animals are attracted to her. Like, it is a constant barrage of like reminding us that this is the best character ever, even though we're not shown anything along those lines. The thing we actually see her be the worst at is being an assassin, which is the thing we are told multiple times, like repeatedly, that she is the best at. The thing that like absolutely sent me every single time was that throughout the story, multiple people multiple times just sneak up on Selena. Wake up. Not surprisingly, it was Kale. Leaning against the doorway, Dorian stood, utterly transfixed. She'd been playing for some time, her back to him. Some assassin, she hadn't even bothered to stir. She yelped and swung toward him. Selena jumped from her seat to find Dorian approaching. Someone was standing at the foot of her bed, like constantly she was being snuck up on, and it just sent me. Here is the thing about having a character that is like super powered, and this is true for any sort of chosen one story story, for any superhero story, if your character has superpowers, and especially if we're told that they're the best at everything, you're going to have to find ways to reasonably tamper their power, or for the audience to understand like why she just doesn't assassin everybody and like run away, assassin everyone. We need to have reasons why this person is contained by this setting and by this plot. If the thing is that Celaena wants her freedom, right? She wants to win this competition and she knows that she is the best at everything, and she, like, the way that she treats this competition is like really upset actually that she has to not attract attention to herself and be middle of the pack, because she is so confident that she can do everything the best. And so there are no stakes for the competition for you, the reader. And so we need something else. And there are these dangers sort of outside, and it would make sense if that put Celaena like on her guard, right? If we saw her double checking things because she knew that as the best at everything, she could win this competition, and the only way that anybody else could win would be to poison her, say. So if she got to her room and there was a mysterious little bag of candy that was unmarked on her pillow, like the assassin from the salt mines who like tells us about all of the things that she went through as a child to get to here, to be the best assassin ever. Like, what does that character do? Because I'm going to tell you that like open the candy and just be like, yum, 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 candy is not the thing that I thought. And we continuously had these moments where the character we are being told we're following did not match with like the actions of the character on page. And again, your reaction to that might be, well, I just ignored it to have fun. And it, like, if that is your jam, is like ignoring the book you're reading and ignoring all of the bad things in the book so that you can have fun, I mean, that's certainly an approach, but I think that we at least can say that there is a lot of room for criticism here. That brings us to the plot, which I would like to call like the LaCroix of a plot. It is like the plot is in another room and there's like a whiff of a plot, because there are a lot of things that are being brought up, and I've mentioned a few of them. There's a competition, there are murders happening in the background of these competitions, like people are failing out of the competition or dying because of the competition, but there are also competitors being murdered. There's political stuff with the king and the duke and Nehemia, and so there are a lot of little elements that are there, but they become the LaCroix because we don't actually spend enough time with any of them. In fact, a lot of the plot is summarized and happens off screen. It is not that I am demanding that this be very action focused or action forward, or that it be like a deep, intricate fantasy. But again, there's a way to do that skillfully where you have more personal stakes inside of a larger fantasy world, but introducing plot elements and then just summarizing them because things happen off screen is not a good way to do that, right? Where you have lines that are like 2 more weeks pass and 3 more people died and I'm gonna go try on a dress. That cheapens a thing that you are doing. You gave me these plots and these stakes, so to skip over them creates a very weak book. I will say that there was a pretty significant attempt at world building in this first book. It's really interesting because one of the things that I've heard about Sarah J. Maas, especially now across all of her series, is about like the connections and the foreshadowing and all of that stuff. But I don't know, I guess I don't know, because I haven't read on in the series how much here is foreshadowing. Sarah J. Maas told us things and then like never mentioned it again, and then in the next book it's gonna be like, remember that thing I told you? One of those things is like very early on we get told that Celaena has magic, that magic has pretty much gone from this land, but Celaena still has magic in her blood, and then that never gets brought up again really. Like, she has magical experiences, but we don't really talk about that again. So I'm sure that like in some other book it's gonna be like, and Celaena has magic. There was another example of like Lady Caltrain at the end. She is taken away, but there's like 5 chapters at the end of this where all of the characters just exposit, like get together and be like, man, what a book. Let's talk about everything that happened in case you missed it at home. And so one of the things is that 2 of the characters, the king and the duke, are like, that's definitely not the last we've seen of Caltrain. I don't know, that just felt like it was happening a lot where we were told things and then they didn't matter anymore, but I'm sure at some point they will matter again. So let's talk about Nehemia. She is a princess that is at the castle, and she is from one of the lands that is being conquered and colonized. Elway is the name of her land and her country. I want to start off by telling you a little bit about how this place and this person present are described to us and like the language that is used around Nehemia and Elway. Nehemia is described as having creamy brown skin. Most of the slaves in Endovir are from Elway, one of the last countries still fighting Ardalin's rule. But when she pestered them for news, many just stared at her with empty eyes, already broken. She shuddered to consider what they'd endure at the hands of Ardalin's forces. Some days, she wondered if they would have been better off dying on the butchering block instead, and if she might have been better off dying the night she'd been betrayed and captured too. We also often see that when she's talking about these enslaved people from Elway, she's talking down about them. Like there is a sense that they've been captured because they're being colonized, but also they're poor. So there's like a class difference thing here as well. One of the first things that she thinks about when she's brought out of the salt mines and she's talking to Kale and Dorian is how lovely it was to hear a voice like her own, cool and articulate, even if he was a nasty brute. She's calling Kale a nasty brute, but she's still like, how nice it is to hear somebody who is articulate after spending all of this time in the salt mines with the slaves. Even Nehemia notices that Celaena speaks her language with the intonation of peasants. We get a lot of this comparison and imagery to enslaved people when we were talking about Eelway. For instance, Celaena tried to think of music, tried to think of a celebratory tune, but could only recall a solitary line from the mournful bellowing of the Eelway songs, deep and slow like honey poured from a jar. And go home at last. There's also a point in the plot where Celaena starts to suspect Nehemia of like shady dealings. I mean, based mostly on the fact that she's foreign and that she found out she could read their language. But as she's like thinking like, oh my God, maybe Nehemia is the one doing these shady things, Celaena thinks to herself, Nehemia was one of the good ones. So let's talk about the mystical minority trope or the magical Negro trope. The magical Negro trope is the foundation for what we could call mystical minority. The difference to me in using one or other of these terms is that we know that Nehemia has brown skin, but we have no concept of like race really in this world. We just know that at this point, she is one of the only, if the only brown skinned character, and she comes from the people that we know are primarily enslaved in Endovir, and we know we have a lot of this comparison and imagery to enslaved people. The magical Negro is long-standing, and it is an incredibly harmful trope that we see in media that dehumanizes Black people. The term itself was popularized by Spike Lee, the filmmaker. It refers to a Black character whose sole or primary purpose is to guide a white character, to support or assist the white protagonist, and often using some sort of magical ability. It positions the Black character, or in the case of the mystical minority, the character of color, as wise and spiritual and otherworldly, and their function within the narrative is to guide the success of the white protagonist. Like I mentioned, there is a long history of this trope throughout media, and there are many reasons why it is problematic. It is dehumanizing for Black people and people of color, specifically as they are slotted into these narratives of being without their own agency, without their own character, without their own individuality, and only existing to serve and to guide the white protagonist. It is an extension of framing service as a good thing, right? Of it being virtuous to be a servant to the white protagonist. These characters that we see fit into this trope can often be self-sacrificing, and we don't see that yet with Nehemia, but we will. We are not there yet with this book, but we do see the way that she's already stepping in to protect Celaena, and we do get paid lip service to like what she wants to do there and the way that she wants to help her people, but all of that gets put into the back seat, as even at the end, as we're recapping everything that happened, Nehemia tells us that all of this time she has been working to protect Celaena. I suspect that down the line we will see more magic and more characters with magic, but we are told here that there is a lack of magic within this world, and we immediately cast the brown character as having some magic, and this is a way again of distancing characters of color from realism and continuing to reinforce the idea that Black people, that people of color are some kind of other. Nehemia is absolutely reduced to that role of like guiding and protecting Celaena. She lacks a personal arc in any sort of significant way. She will eventually give her life for Selena and to further her arc. And her primary characterization in this book is tied to her otherness. She is exotified throughout the text. One of the last things that we see Nehemia do is rename Selena. I name you Elentia. She kisses the assassin's brow. I give you this name to use with honor, to use when other names grow too heavy. I name you Elentia, spirit that could not be broken. It is an absolutely reprehensible use of this character, and oftentimes when you even get fans of Sarah J Maas to acknowledge this in any way, it is so easy for them to gloss over it. The way that this character and these people are portrayed is incredibly racist. Honestly, I can't separate one from the other, that both in a case in real life, Sarah J Maas's action, and in the case of reading this work and considering it critically, there is the death of a Black woman, of a woman of color, in order to promote the white main character. That's it for me today. I would love to talk to you all about Throne of Glass and the future of this project. I ask that you keep things respectful, especially if you are a fan of Sarah J Maas. If you're coming in here to say something like it's not too deep, you're just getting immediately deleted. I'm only dealing with people who can get out of the shallow end of the pool. As always, if you want to support me and my work, you can follow the link in the description and on the screen. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. There was a line that was like, the new murder cast a pall over the next 2 weeks. The new murder cast a pall over the murder competition? Like, no, too much.